The rain hammered against the old wooden roof, its rhythm echoing the turmoil inside Maya's chest. She opened the drawer hesitantly, her fingers trembling as though touching forbidden history. A small envelope, yellowed and creased by time, stared back at her. Maya whispered, "Why did I hide you away?" Her voice cracked, raw, and brittle. The paper carried her forgotten vow, a promise inked with desperation, one that had slipped into silence. She remembered the day she swore to protect a child, swore never to leave. The letter screamed of betrayal, not from others, but from herself. Shame surged, burning her throat. She collapsed into the chair, clutching the letter like a relic of grief. Her heart begged for denial, but the truth had teeth. She had abandoned more than words. She had abandoned trust. Outside, lightning tore across the sky, illuminating her tears. Maya muttered, "I swore, and I failed." The moment hung heavy, suffocating, a storm both within and without. The forgotten promise had awakened, and there would be no escape. The storm did not relent, and neither did the weight pressing against Maya's heart. She stared at the letter, every word carved into her memory like a blade, reopening an old wound. The forgotten vow reminded her of a child's trust she had shattered. The thought clawed at her chest, stealing breath. She whispered, "How do I undo years of silence?" Her reflection in the rain-streaked window looked like a stranger's face. The storm outside was only a mirror to the storm inside. Guilt had stalked her for years, disguised as strength, but now it stood exposed. She pressed her forehead against the glass, cold against her burning skin. The past had come calling, demanding a debt unpaid. Maya sank onto the wooden floor, the letter trembling in her grip. Memories surged, voices of promises made with hope, faces blurred by time. Her chest ached with the knowledge she had not been who she vowed to be. Every beat of the storm outside pounded her guilt deeper. She whispered, "What kind of guardian forgets?" Her voice broke into silence, filled only by the groaning of the house under the rain. She had buried this truth under layers of denial, but tonight it rose with violent clarity. This was the price of silence, and she could no longer pay it quietly. Her phone buzzed on the table, but she could not lift it. The world outside this attic no longer mattered. What mattered was the face of a child she once swore to protect, a face she had not seen in years. That absence screamed louder than the thunder. She closed her eyes, but the silence there was worse. The mentor's words echoed from years past. A promise binds the soul, not just the tongue. Maya felt those words burn as truth. She whispered, "Ruth, you were right." For the first time in years, she did not fight the guilt. She let it consume her, because maybe that was the beginning of healing. Maya rose unsteadily, clutching the letter like a fragile flame. She walked to the center of the room, heart pounding like a drum of reckoning. For years she had locked the past away, convincing herself she had no choice. But now the truth had broken free, and there would be no turning back. She whispered into the storm, "I will face this." Her voice cracked, but the conviction surprised her. Lightning flared across her silhouette, her resolve carved against the storm. The forgotten promise was no longer hidden. Tonight it had been remembered, and it demanded her courage. Morning light filtered through the city as Maya carried the letter in her bag, her hands clenched tight around its memory. She entered the social services office where her heart pounded like a drum. The smell of coffee and ink mixed with nerves. Clara Jensen sat at her desk, papers stacked high, eyes sharp as glass. Maya's voice trembled when she said, "I need to make this right." Clara studied her, skeptical, the weight of bureaucracy pressing in the silence. The office hum of phones and printers drowned Maya's courage. "Hey." Clara finally spoke, "Promises written are easy, kept ones are harder." The words cut through Maya like ice, truth delivered without mercy. She lowered her gaze, but her determination remained unbroken. Later that evening, Maya sat across from Noah Brooks in a quiet cafe. The smell of roasted beans and faint jazz floated in the air. Her voice broke as she confessed, I failed them, Noah. I turned away when I should have stayed. Noah leaned forward, his brown eyes filled with concern. He reached across the table, his hand steady against her shaking one. You can't change the past, he said softly, but you can face what's left of it. Maya's tears blurred the world, but his words carved a path through her despair. She whispered, I'm terrified of being seen as the one who abandoned. Noah replied, then prove you're not. Show them who you are now. The cafe lights flickered softly, wrapping them in fragile hope. The next day, Maya walked into a courthouse, marble floors echoing beneath her steps. At the far end stood Victor Hale, arms folded, face like stone. His stare carried no warmth, only judgment. Maya approached carefully, her throat tight. She said, I want to put things right. Victor's voice struck cold. You left them broken, Maya. Now you expect to walk back. His words pierced deeper than any blade. She trembled, but lifted her chin. I don't expect forgiveness. I only seek a chance. His silence was heavy, the law and his anger standing like a wall before her. For a moment, the storm outside the tall windows mirrored the storm within the hall. Later, Maya met Ethan Cole in a small law office filled with shelves of case files. His calm demeanor contrasted the storm raging inside her. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes thoughtful. If you want this, you'll need to be precise and brave, he said. Maya nodded, clutching the letter like a weapon. I'm ready to be honest, she answered, her voice carrying both fear and resolve. He studied her closely. Honesty cuts both ways. It may free you, or it may wound you. The hum of the desk lamp filled the silence. Maya whispered, then let it wound me. I can't live caged by silence anymore. His nod was slow, weighted with respect. Days passed, and Maya returned to the office only to hear Clara's verdict. Clara shook her head, tone sharp as glass. Access is denied for now. Trust isn't given in an instant. Maya's chest collapsed under the weight of the words. She whispered, so I'm too late. Clara's eyes softened for a moment. You're not too late, but the road is steep. Maya walked out into the fading sunlight, the city alive with its indifference. The crowd moved on as if nothing had shifted, but inside her everything cracked. Each denial was another reminder of what her silence had cost. Yet the flame of resolve refused to die. She whispered to herself, I will climb. Morning broke pale and uncertain as Maya waited outside Clara's office, the letter warmed by her grip. The hallway smelled of toner and old carpet, a small world for impossible asks. She stepped in when called, spine straight, though her voice wavered. Maya said, I need time to prove I can keep what I once broke. Clara's eyes measured cost, not sentiment, as the clock ticked like a gavel. Clara said, time is not a remedy if nothing changes with it. The words stung, but they did not end her resolve. Maya breathed, counting every reason to stay rather than run. She said, give me tasks, checks, anything that builds trust, not excuses. Silence opened, and fragile hope took one careful breath. Clara said, prove it in actions I can verify, not in promises I must believe. The courthouse atrium swallowed footsteps as Victor stood beneath the high glass. His posture said no before his voice could. Maya approached, carrying the air of someone who chose truth over comfort. She said, I will not ask you to forget, only to watch what I do now. Victor held her in a sterile silence that felt colder than winter. Victor said, hurt leaves a ledger, and your account is not closed. She flinched, yet she did not retreat. Maya said, let the ledger include what I do next. The sun slid across stone and steel, like time moving a reluctant inch. He looked past her, toward cases and people who did not falter. Victor said, I will not ease your path, but I will not block what is lawful. Maya found Ruth in a quiet garden, where wind combed the tall grasses. The city hummed beyond the fence like a softer drum. Ruth poured tea as if time could be steeped into courage. Ruth said, name the fear, then act against it daily. Maya felt the words settle like stones she could step on. She said, I fear being the same person who left, even while I try to return. Ruth nodded, and the leaves answered with a gentle rasp. Ruth said, let your actions teach your fear a smaller shape. The advice felt simple, but it stretched a bridge across a canyon. Maya closed her eyes and rehearsed tomorrow in her breath. She said, then I will keep showing up until the shape fits inside my pocket. Ethan's office smelled of paper and rain, a clean order against her storm. Case files towered like stern witnesses beside the lamp. Ethan said, there is a path, but it requires you to turn your insides outward. Maya steadied her breath, feeling both exposed and ready. She said, I am done hiding behind reasons that sound noble and mean nothing. He slid a checklist across the desk, each box a hard inch forward. Ethan said, proof of consistency, verified contacts, weekly reports, and no missed calls. She nodded, accepting the weight as if it were a key. The list looked less like punishment and more like scaffolding. Maya said, I will build with this until the ground stops shaking. The first report went in on time, but bureaucracy answered with a snare. A form had been routed wrong, and a week vanished into the shuffle. Clara said, process does not bend to urgency, even when urgency is right. Maya swallowed the spike of panic and chose movement over anger. She said, tell me how to correct it, and I will correct it today. Victor's office returned a delay notice that read like a closed door. Ethan said, we appeal, we document, we keep the trail clean. Ruth's words threaded her spine into a steadier line. Maya said, I will not call this a sign to stop, only a step I will take twice. The setback settled like rain, annoying and persistent, but survivable. Clara's office smelled of dust and ink when Maya sat down, her hands trembling as she unfolded the file. Clara slid a document across the desk, her voice sharp but steady. Clara said, records show the child was not abandoned. Custody shifted under sealed orders. Maya's breath caught, the air turning heavy as the truth unfolded. She whispered, then all these years I carried a lie. Clara studied her, eyes softer now. Clara said, the system buried the transfer, but you bore the blame. Shame mingled with relief, leaving Maya dizzy. The weight of betrayal shifted, not erased, but altered. She saw new scars carved by silence, and fresh pain lit her chest. Victor's office was dim, blinds slicing sunlight into bars across his desk. He stood rigid, staring at the floor before meeting her eyes. Maya said, you fought me with bitterness, but you knew more than I did. His jaw tightened, grief pressing through the cracks of control. Victor said, my brother lost his life trusting promises. I vowed no child would ever be left unguarded again. Maya's heart pounded as she saw pain where she expected cruelty. She said, your armor is grief, not malice. His silence lingered, thick and unyielding, but the truth had torn at his walls. For the first time Maya glimpsed the wound beneath his judgment. Maya sat alone that evening, the letter open on her lap, clarity sharpening like glass. The vow had not vanished, but had been twisted by silence. She whispered, delayed, not discarded. She realized someone had buried the truth, perhaps to shield, perhaps to control. Each line of the letter looked different now, less an indictment, more a plea. The promise was not broken, it was stolen and hidden. She felt anger coil, but underneath it, new strength surged. She said, I cannot undo the loss, but I can expose the lie. The storm outside cleared, moonlight spilling across the floor like quiet confirmation. At a corner table in the cafe, Noah leaned forward, sensing Maya's turmoil. She confessed, you helped me bury the truth, thinking silence would spare me. His face dropped, guilt written in every line. Noah said, I wanted to protect you from breaking apart. I thought silence was mercy. Her voice trembled with both anger and love. Maya said, it wasn't mercy, it was another cage. Tears gathered in his eyes as he admitted, I thought I was saving you. I only delayed your healing. They sat in silence, friendship tested, their bond reshaped by honesty. It hurt, but it was the wound that could finally mend. Maya stood at the threshold of a decision, the courthouse looming behind her. The revelations had reshaped every piece of the puzzle. She whispered, "The truth doesn't set you free. It binds you to act." Her voice cracked, but the resolve carried through the cracks. Victor's words, Clara's files, Noah's confession, Ruth's wisdom, Ethan's list, all pointed to one path. She would not run again. Maya said, "I choose to carry this forward, no matter the cost." The city roared around her, indifferent, but she felt her own heart steady. The promise had not been erased. It had become her anchor. The courtroom air was brittle with tension, as accusations clashed like blades. Victor's words carried fury, while Clara's voice cut with precision. Maya stood in the middle, her heart straining under the storm. She whispered, "You think silence was choice, but it was fear." Victor said, "Fear does not excuse damage." His anger cracked against her skin. Clara said, "You want access, but trust demands more than declarations." The echo of voices pounded, and for a moment Maya wanted to fold into the shadows. Instead, she clenched the letter tighter. She said, "I will not run from the ashes I created." The conflict left her shaken, but in the tremor, resolve grew. When the gavel fell, Maya left the hall and collapsed against the cold marble wall. The noise of victory and defeat blended into silence. Her chest heaved as she whispered, "I fear I am beyond repair." She closed her eyes and saw the child's face she once promised to protect. Guilt crawled like fire beneath her ribs. She pressed her forehead against stone, desperate to hold herself together. The world blurred, but her voice clawed back, softer now. She said, "I will walk through every door until one stays open." The hallway held no comfort, but her choice to remain standing was a victory. In Ruth's quiet garden, Maya confessed, "The truth tore me apart, but I cannot let it bury me again." Ruth poured tea, her hands steady though her eyes carried sorrow. Ruth said, "Forgiveness does not erase the wound, it only stops it from owning you." Maya listened as if her soul was drinking. She said, "So I must forgive without expecting to be forgiven." Ruth nodded, voice soft. Ruth said, "Healing begins when you let responsibility live beside compassion." Maya felt the weight shift in her chest, not gone, but held with steadier arms. She whispered, "Then I will let both exist." Maya returned to Victor's office, her steps echoing louder than her voice. He looked up, jaw tight, expecting weakness. Instead, Maya set the letter down between them. She said, "I will not demand forgiveness. I ask only the chance to prove myself." His silence carried decades of grief, and his eyes flickered with hesitation. Victor said, "Words are still air." Maya leaned closer, her voice steady. She said, "Then measure me by action, not words. I will show up even when you doubt." The moment burned, neither victory nor defeat, but the first brick laid on broken ground. The sun dipped low as Maya walked away from the building, her chest heavier yet strangely lighter. Clara had not granted trust, Victor had not offered peace, but a door had opened, narrow, fragile, but real. She whispered, "I will climb even if the slope is endless." The city swirled around her with its indifferent rhythm, horns blaring, footsteps rushing. She gripped the strap of her bag, each step a vow repeated. The sky turned deep orange, bleeding into purple, as if the heavens echoed her turmoil. She said, "Let tomorrow come, I will still stand." The burden felt unbearable, yet she chose to carry it. The hearing chamber buzzed with whispers as Maya stepped forward, the letter pressed tight in her hands. The judge's gavel struck, silencing the crowd. Maya's chest rose and fell, as though she was carrying the weight of an entire world. She whispered, "I am here because I must be." Victor sat rigid at the table, his gaze sharp but shadowed by doubt. Clara's voice announced the records, crisp and unforgiving. Ethan leaned toward her, steady, and said, "Stand in your truth." Maya nodded, gripping the paper like a lifeline. Every eye in the room burned against her, but she did not step back. The hearing had begun, and her soul was on trial. When called to speak, Maya rose, her voice breaking but clear. She said, "I will not offer excuses. I will only tell you the truth." The words spilled from her, each heavy with years of silence. She confessed her fear, her failure, and the weight of burying the vow. Tears blurred her sight, but her voice did not falter. Victor's glare faltered for a moment, a crack in stone. The judge listened, pen tapping lightly, silence stretching between each sentence. Maya ended with a whisper, "I cannot erase the past, but I will not abandon the future." The chamber exhaled, the echo of her truth lingering. Victor shifted in his seat, his armor beginning to crack. His voice trembled with anger and grief. Victor said, "I buried my brother, and I buried trust with him. I could not let another child suffer." His fists clenched, jaw set, but his eyes glistened. He looked at Maya, pain and fury clashing inside him. Victor said, "You remind me of promises that failed him." Maya lowered her gaze, then lifted it again, refusing to hide. She said, "I am not your brother's shadow. I am only myself, flawed and still here." For a moment, silence carved out the room, heavier than any verdict. His anger did not vanish, but his grief spoke louder. The decision weighed heavily, but the judge leaned forward, eyes sharp yet searching. The air was thick with expectation. The judge said, "This court will not grant full trust in a single day, but it will grant you a path to prove it." Maya's breath shook, relief and fear tangled like vines. Ethan touched her arm lightly, grounding her. Clara noted conditions, voice cool as glass, regular reports, monitored visits, strict oversight. Maya nodded, her voice small but firm. She said, "I accept every condition. I will walk every step." The verdict was not triumph, but it was hope carved into law. When the gavel fell, Maya closed her eyes, her chest rising as though drawing breath for the first time. This was not an ending but a doorway carved from stone. She whispered, "The cost is mine to carry, and I will not set it down." Outside the storm had cleared, sunlight dripping gold across wet pavement. Victor walked past, shoulders heavy but eyes less hostile. Clara gathered her files, cool as ever but not cruel. Ethan offered no words, only a nod that carried strength. Maya stepped onto the courthouse steps, her vow no longer buried but bound to her life. The climb had begun, and she chose to rise. Morning settled into small rituals that stitched new seams into torn days. Maya rose early and logged each task with careful hands. She whispered, "Keep the promise in motion." The kettle sang while the city blinked awake. She checked reports, called the numbers, and filed proof without fanfare. Ethan said, "Consistency is a language the system understands." She nodded, letting patience be her pulse. The ache still lived in her ribs, but it did not own the air. She walked a route she once avoided, passing windows that kept yesterday. Maya said, "I will show up until showing up is who I am." The vow felt less like weight, and more like spine. Noah waited on a park bench with 2 coffees and a quiet smile. He said, "I started therapy last week." The words landed like sunlight. Maya exhaled, surprised by the tenderness of relief. She said, "You carried me when you could not carry yourself." He nodded, eyes bright with new honesty. Noah said, "I cannot fix the past, but I can stop repeating it." Wind tugged the leaves, and the day felt less heavy. They spoke of ordinary things that finally sounded true. Maya said, "We will not hide in kindness." He laughed softly. He said, "Then let our kindness be brave." Evening pooled in Ethan's office as rain traced silver lines on the glass. He reviewed her reports, the neat margins speaking for her. Ethan said, "Trust grows in inches, and your inches are adding up." She looked at him and felt the pull of something careful. Maya said, "I want us to move with the same honesty." He closed the file and met her gaze without hurry. Ethan said, "No rescues, only partnership." The room held its breath and then exhaled. She said, "I choose a pace that keeps the promise intact." He nodded, a quiet yes that did not need flourish. Ruth met her at the garden gate where the air smelled of rosemary and rain. The mentor's hands were gentle as she poured tea. Ruth said, "You have learned to carry without dragging." Maya felt the truth settle like a small blessing. She said, "Your voice taught me to walk when my legs were only fear." Ruth smiled, lines deepening with grace. Ruth said, "Let my voice become your own and let mine quiet." The parting hurt, but it did not shatter. Maya said, "Thank you for the bridge." Ruth answered, "You built the steps." Night returned with a calm sky and a city that no longer felt like a judge. Maya stood at her attic window where the first tear once fell. She unfolded the letter, not as a wound but as a compass. She said, "I remember, and I choose." The room carried no thunder now, only steady breath. Footsteps sounded on the stair, and she did not flinch. She tucked the letter away and straightened her shoulders. Maya said, "A promise is kept in the next small act." The silence that followed felt like peace earning its place. The burden had become a path, and she was walking it.